The Voluntary Self-Regulation body of the film industry, FSK, is tasked with the reviewing of films and other media offerings in Germany for their content and issuing age recommendations. One would think, then, that they carefully examine which films are appropriate for which age group. But this is clearly not the case, as the blog altersfreigabencheck.wordpress.com, among others, found after examining 200 randomly selected films. The authors concluded that around 50% of the films were rated too low by the FSK. Sexual content, depictions of violence, and drug use were rated very loosely by the FSK. Want an example?
Shortly after its release in Germany, the terrifyingly brutal horror film Dance of the Devils was labeled trivializing violence by the Munich District Court on February 27, 1985, and confiscated. At the time, the FSK wanted to release the film in a slightly edited form from the age of 18. But even this was not approved by the Munich District and Regional Court. In 1993, the film was linked to the Sondershausen murder case. In the opinion of the Mühlhausen Regional Court, the perpetrators' inhibitions were lowered by their constant preoccupation with satanic ideas and depictions of killing in films, making such an act possible. And now comes the surprise. In October 2016, the indexing was completely lifted at the request of rights holder Sony. In January 2017, the unabridged version was even given an age rating of 16 and above, following a new review by the FSK. It was then released uncut on DVD. In the same year, 2016, several cinema operators wrote an open letter to the FSK criticizing it for issuing age ratings that were too low. They asked the FSK whether it did not fear any consequences for its low ratings. The letter also criticized the fact that films that were already rated too low, for example from the age of 12, were also watched by younger visitors. The so-called parental guidance regulation also allows children aged 6 and over to watch a movie from the age of 12 in the cinema if their parents are present. Christiane von Wahlert, then managing director of the FSK, also replied in an open letter that nobody at the FSK was afraid of possible consequences because we act to the best of our knowledge and belief. It is the parents' responsibility to decide which films their children are allowed to watch.
Reason enough for KLA TV to take a closer look at the FSK and its origins. During our research, we discovered interesting background information, and with this program, we reveal the previously unknown Freemason and Secret Service involvement of the players in the FSK's history. The FSK was founded by a US film official and modeled on the US Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, or MPPDA for short. But let's start from the very beginning and take a closer look at the first and long-serving president of the aforementioned MPPDA. It all began with him. William Harrison Hayes, also known as Will Hayes, was born on November 5, 1879 in the US state of Indiana. From 1918 to 1921, Hayes chaired the Republican National Committee and in this capacity also served as campaign manager for the 29th President of the United States, Warren G. Harding, in 1920.
What is special about this US president?
Harding was a 32-degree Freemason and even rose to the 33rd and highest Masonic degree before his death in 1923. Alongside Will Hayes, his presidency was also supported by Masonic greats, such as Henry Ford. His short term as US president from 1921 to 1923 was characterized by profiteering and corruption, making him one of the worst presidents of the United States, according to numerous historian reports.
But now back to Will Hayes, who, according to a Time report from September 24, 1928, was himself a 32-degree Freemason. After helping Harding become president, Hayes himself was given the then very powerful office of Postmaster General. However, Hayes was forced to resign from this office shortly thereafter due to his involvement in the Teapot Dome scandal. This was one of the largest political bribery scandals in the US history and is comparable to the Watergate scandal.
Was Hayes' Masonic connection to U.S. President Harding the reason for his political rise? And how did Hayes seamlessly make it to his top position in the film industry despite heavy political scandals?
In the film industry, Hayes was also well connected with Hollywood's Freemasons. In his biography of his first year in Hollywood, he wrote, among other things, "That evening it was my turn to bully Doug a little, as he was one of 100 candidates being inducted into the Loyal Order of Moose. As a member of the Indianapolis Lodge, I was invited to attend the ceremony. Sidney Chaplin and his famous brother Charlie were there that evening. The Order of Moose is an order with loyal American principles." In this context, it's worth mentioning that Freemason Charlie Chaplin was one of the most influential comedians of the 20th century and one of the most powerful officials in the rise of Hollywood.
Now, you may be asking yourself, what does any of this have to do with the age restriction issue? Stay tuned.
In the 1920s, the US Congress debated the introduction of a federal law to control movie content, and some states passed censorship laws. To anticipate this legislation, the film industry itself took over this function and founded the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, or MPPDA for short. This should serve as an instrument of voluntary self-regulation. In other words, they evaded state control by taking over the control function for their own film productions themselves, a scandal in itself.
The film industry appointed Will Hayes as president of the MPPDA due to his political experience. The preceding political scandals suddenly seemed to no longer matter. The 32nd degree Freemason held the office from 1922 to 1945, and on March 31st, 1930, drafted a production code called the Hayes Code. This code served as a model for the founding of the German Federal Film Board, FSK. The MPPDA, later called the MPAA, continued to fill its leadership positions with dubious individuals, even decades later, such as Jack Valenti, a powerful film lobbyist with excellent connections in Washington. Dan Glickman also later became president of the MPAA. Glickman served as a chairman of the U.S. House Intelligence Committee from 1993 to 1995 and as a chairman of the MPAA from 2004 to 2010. An interesting career move, isn't it? It's well known that the U.S. intelligence agency and CIA predecessor, the OSS, exerted a strong influence on Hollywood. Hundreds of Hollywood filmmakers joined the OSS during World War II. Under the leadership of director John Ford, they produced training, reconnaissance, and propaganda films for the war effort. This influence is maintained by the CIA to this day.
Now let's take a look at what the MPPDA from the USA has to do with the German FSK.
Erich Pommer was born on July 20th, 1889, the son of a linen merchant in the German city of Hildesheim, and pursued a career in the film industry. In 1933, Pommer traveled to the US to work for Fox Film. In 1944, he received US citizenship and returned to Germany in 1946 as the highest film officer of the American military government. In this role, he developed the Voluntary Self-Regulation of the Film Industry, FSK. In early 1948, together with Horst von Hartlieb and Kurt Oertel, based on the aforementioned Hayes Code of 1930-34.
We summarize.
First, the 32-degree Freemason Hayes was appointed by the 33-degree Freemason and U.S. President Harding as one of the most powerful politicians in the USA at the time. Second, due to one of the biggest political bribery scandals in the USA, Hayes had to resign from his political office. Third, at the time, Congress was discussing legal regulations on the censorship of films. However, the film industry preempted this and created its own control body, the MPPDA, in order to avoid state censorship. Fourth, despite all the political scandals, Hayes was appointed president of the MPPDA and wrote the Hayes Code. His connections to the most powerful functionaries and Freemasons in Hollywood, such as Charlie Chaplin, may have made this career possible for him. Fifth, the CIA predecessor and Secret Service OSS exerted a strong influence on Hollywood from the very beginning. After Hayes, the MPPDA also appointed other questionable people to the board, such as the former chairman of the U.S. Intelligence Committee, Dan Glickman. Sixth, the Hayes Code later became the model for the founding of the German FSK, the Voluntary Self-Regulation body of the film industry. Hayes, the 32-degree Freemason, thus becomes one of the most powerful politicians in the USA. Through a 33-degree Freemason president, fails there with major scandals, then immediately starts at the top with Freemason connections in Hollywood and snatches censorship out of the state's hands in order to take it over for the film industry himself. The US military sends film officer Pommer to Germany, and there it is, the FSK.
Just sounds like a bad movie. Why is this all questionable and dangerous from our point of view?
Because this association, founded by Freemasons, ensures that children, with their parents' consent, are exposed to completely inappropriate content with completely inappropriate age restrictions. We can only imagine the psychological damage that has been and continues to be caused to the youngest members of our society when they are exposed to content inappropriate for their age. The examples mentioned at the beginning are just the tip of the iceberg. On the other hand, valuable films with completely harmless depictions are banned entirely by the FSK. For example, the feature film Cosima, Perfectly Naive, by KLA-TV founder Ivo Zazek. Only after he removed a questionable, harmless depiction from the film was the film allowed to be released with a still far too high rating of 16 and over. In the program World and the Trap of Freemasons, Ivo Zazek clearly explains why Freemason networks pose a threat to the entire world, and therefore also to you, dear viewers. Hollywood and the history of age ratings are only part of the bigger picture. And in this time, it is more important than ever to expose all Freemasonry entanglements in all areas of our lives. We conclude our contribution with an excerpt from Ivo Zazek's speech and ask you to share this broadcast.
As we will now see in the following, one and the same Luciferian secret society has nestled itself, or rather crept into all the important control centers of our society for centuries worldwide. And their methods are always the same: lies and deception on principle. As a rule, they do exactly the opposite of what they promise. And yet, for them, humans are no better than cattle or machines. They are simply commodities that should be decimated to 500 million. That's what they say openly. And this Luciferian cult, which has formed itself in secret society structures for centuries, really dominates all the peoples of this world. They keep throwing buzzwords such as democracy, tolerance, brotherhood, and freedom all the time. But they manipulate our politicians and all conceivable structures with cunningly devised methods. Words and deeds do not match, dear ones. And it is not the people who control them, but they are controlling the peoples. That's the worst thing about it. And everything is happening in complete disregard to any popular knowledge, completely ignoring any applicable law or applicable constitutions. And everything they do either without any political mandate or without a mandate from the people, or at least by the aforementioned means of hypocritically obtaining memberships from unsuspecting, well-believing states. Everything they do and manipulate completely ignores any of the people's understanding of justice. I said the people's. They are constantly forcing new laws on us, completely ignoring any democratic principle. They're exerting more and more influence on our schools, on our children. and they are doing so consistently, bypassing all parents, teachers, and statutory representatives. It is therefore a tangible conspiracy that bypasses all our responsible persons and all accountability. We have proven in countless KLA TV broadcasts that also the following institutions were all founded by this Luciferian, organized, secret society of high-grade Freemasonry. We need new, truly neutral supervisory boards and expertise bodies and committees. We need new courts that now also stand up for the people and not just for state finances or elite interests. There must be an end to all dehumanization by the state or dehumanization by medicine, by the pharmaceutical industry, by the judiciary, by education. The dehumanization by politics must end, and by science as well. Put an end to the dehumanization caused by Satanism, by all the nihilism and nepotism we are talking about here all the time.